Hey, what's up everyone on YouTube and Twitter? So since the last video, we saw the largest crypto liquidation event in history. This was larger than the 2020 crash. This was larger than Luna. This was larger than FTX. This was the largest crypto liquidation in history. And typically, especially on those last three examples, those marked the lows for a very significant amount of time. Obviously, the crash in 2020 was the low. The FTX crash was also the low. And the Luna crash also marked the low for approximately 6 months. If we go back to the bear market, this was way back here. This was the Luna crash back here. This marked the low before eventually breaking down during the FTX crash, which ended up being low. So I do believe that despite all the negativity, especially for the altcoins, I do think that the low is likely in for a lot of them. However, the paths that they take to recovery might resemble what we saw back in 2020 and then in 2022. So we go back to 2020. This was the Bitcoin chart. Bitcoin back here after this crash, it took approximately 2 months for Bitcoin to fully recover here. This was back in March of 2020. The recovery wasn't finished until about here. This was May of 2020. And if you look at the price action, it was very, very choppy the days after. If you look at this, there were some extreme swings for Bitcoin. And this is what I'm pretty much expecting for the altcoins. Bitcoin, for this crash that we just recently saw, wasn't really damaged. It didn't break market structure, it didn't break support, but all of the alts pretty much broke support. Most of them went down 50% plus. Some of them went down 60, 70, 80, even 90%. So we saw just major structural breakdowns for so many alts across the board. So I would think that based on history, it might take some time. So to expect alts to just recover within a few days or within a few weeks should just not be expected. If you're expecting that, you're probably going to be disappointed, right? However, with that said, it is always possible that they instantly recover, but history says that after huge liquidation events, this does not happen. This took 2 months back here in 2020. If we go back to 2022, this was during the bear market. This was the first breakdown with Luna. This took about approximately another 2 months before getting back up to this high before eventually breaking down, but this was during a bear market. And then we had the FTX crash back here in November of 2022. And during this crash, we end up having a double bottom here. If you zoom in, we made the low, then came back up, and then eventually made a double bottom a few weeks later. So there is always a possibility that a lot of these alts end up making a double bottom, or it's also possible it plays out like 2020 where we see higher lows. But even then, we saw a lot of volatility the days after. And we're kind of seeing that now, especially with Ethereum. Ethereum had moved up and has since pulled back a little bit. It's trying to get back above this $2,800 level. So that's a significant area you want to watch for Ethereum. If it can break above this resistance here, that would be the first good sign that the recovery is potentially happening. It's basically testing it right now, but the damage was done, right? This dropped significantly back down to the August low, so there was a lot of damage done on Ethereum. If we take a look back at Bitcoin, Bitcoin held support. If you open up these SMAs, this is a 10 SMA and the 43 SMA. We're currently below, so we had gotten back above it, but end up losing it once again. So Bitcoin is under some pressure. It needs to reclaim this 43 SMA, which currently sits around 99,000. But Bitcoin structure overall looks a lot different than all the alts. And a lot of people are interested in wondering, are alts pretty much done now, or are they going to recover? Will it play out like it did in 2017 and 2021, where we eventually saw Bitcoin dominance break down? So if we go back to those years, if we look back to 2017, we go to the weekly time frame, this major breakdown for Bitcoin dominance began in Q1, but more specifically, you start to see this drop off take place. This was the end of February of 2017, and then this ended up running through the rest of the year. So in the 2017 example, this started in late February, early March. If you go to 2021, this drop off started in January. Essentially, it had this pullback, and then it eventually really started to break down starting in April of 2021. So in both examples, it started in Q1 of both 2017 and 2021. We both had red quarters in both examples. So far, Q1 of 2025 has started off green, but there's still plenty of time left. It's only February 5th, so there's almost 2 full months for this to kind of reverse course. And if it were to start, it would probably start with the weekly RSI. If we look at this, if we zoom in, but in order for this to play out, a few things would have to happen here. Currently, the weekly RSI sits around 63, and the high from back here sits around 74. So we would need the RSI to pull back before breaking above this high. So if we were to see a red candle at some point in the future, red weekly candle, a pullback that's significant enough to create the bearish divergence, then we would finally have bearish divergence on the Bitcoin dominance chart for the first time in a very, very long time. And this would probably help alts out. We'd probably start to see alts outperform Bitcoin once again. And Bitcoin dominance broke to a new local high here. This ended up wicking up, but a lot of it ended up selling back off. So it's still below this resistance area, but we have to wait for the weekly time frame to see how it ends up playing out. This is obviously in a massive, massive uptrend. So you still have to favor that this uptrend will continue. The trend is your friend essentially until the end, until it actually breaks down and makes a lower low, which would be falling below 54.5% on the Bitcoin dominance. If it fell below that, it would have a lower low that would confirm that the trend is now changing and the uptrend is more than likely over. But for now, it is in an uptrend, so this still favors a continuation, but does have this potential weekly bearish divergence forming that we can watch and look for over the coming weeks. We'll see this ends up playing out. But of course, a lot of this is ultimately dependent on Ethereum. It's going to require Ethereum to make a push. Ethereum is the largest altcoin out there, so it is important for Ethereum to outperform Bitcoin in order to push Bitcoin dominance down. But we have not seen that since 2021. This was the last time Ethereum really outperformed Bitcoin. So it's been many, many years. It's been many, many years in a downtrend against Bitcoin. So until this turns around, it's not likely for Bitcoin dominance to change direction. Bitcoin dominance would probably not get pulled down by the other alts. It really requires Ethereum to make this push. So a lot is riding on Ethereum. We will see if Ethereum can ever break back above this resistance. It's finding support here right now. It's currently above 2,800, but it needs to break the highs from earlier in the year and then ultimately push to new all-time highs. At this point, back in 2021, it had already reached all-time highs, but if you go back to 2017, this was when it broke all-time highs. It was around the March timeframe. It made new all-time highs here. So in one cycle, it broke out in January of 2021, and the other cycle, it started in March of 2017. So there is a potential that this is similar to March, but it needs to start soon. It also needs to pull Bitcoin dominance down, which also would need to start this quarter just based on history. So with that said, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.